Well, so let's continue with after bishop c4 and knight b6 instead of these queen c7 moves. This is generally the most natural move, and in other variations also, when the knight is on d5, the bishop is attacking with bishop c4 and the knight is coming to b6 by tempo. And the bishop is usually going to b3, and okay, the game has starting here. Knight c6. Let's see how about d5. So black is already not really fighting for the material, because d takes c3 would be also dangerous, because knight takes c3 and it's a huge development advantage he has. For example, knight c6 and yeah, just kind of knight f3 and we already saw similar position. Black is much more undeveloped, white has space advantage also, and after kind of e6, later we will come with knight e4, knight d6 or knight b5 also. First of all, castle, and white looks nicely placed. So let's see how about d5 instead. C takes d4, of course, take it back, and bishop f5. Yeah, because if knight c6 instead, white can already play bishop c2 and prevent the bishop f5, and now the so prevent this, so the c8 bishop's development is not so easy. Knight b4, of course, white has to calculate with this, but knight c3, knight takes c2, it's actually rare when we give up the bishop pair, but now we have some activity for it. Queen takes c2, e6. Now we are like in French, and in the French structures the c8 bishop usually is very passive, and now we can see the same. Queen d3. Queen d3 was an interesting improvement in Mamedov Volokitin game, and white would like to transfer the queen to the king's side. It can be really useful on the king's side's attack, because usually in these e5 structures, when there is no knight on f6, the attack can be more powerful against the short castle's black king. Bishop d7, knight ge2. Probably the knight is a bit more flexible than on f3, and also doesn't close. So compared to knight f3, doesn't close the queen's third rank maneuver. So knight ge2, f6, and simply queen g3, and the white is, I think, slightly better objectively, or we can just say he has a nice initiative here. Okay, alright, so this was the knight c6, bishop c2, and that's why bishop f5, because he would like to control this diagonal and reach a normal French structure when the bishop went out already. And knight e2. Also white tries the flexible knight developing, because he would like to transfer the knight to g3, from where takes under pressure for the black bishop. On the other hand, h4 was also a possibility. This move we can see from the Caro-Kann, one of the Caro-Kann variation. Let me show you how is that going on. In the advanced variation we have similar motif, bishop f5 and h4, one of the main line nowadays. It's very trendy. White's idea is just gaining some space on the king's side, and then the natural e6 is not working, because g4, bishop e4, f3, bishop g6 and h5, and the bishop is trapped. Now if I jump back to our current position, it's a little bit different, because now e6 is working, because in case of g4, still even bishop e4, f3, but the bishop can take the b1 knight, and he didn't lose any piece, and white a little bit weaken himself, little bit. So that's why knight c3 happened, a tricky developing move, because white is already threatening with g4 now, so black has to play h5, but okay, after knight g2, this is also completely normal middle game, when white has several normal plan, bishop g5, the knight can come to g3 or f4, depend on black's play, so it's a completely playable middle game. So this h4 is also an interesting option. Let's see how about the knight e2, e6, knight g3, bishop g6, and h4. So coming with the same idea, threatening with h5, a little bit attack the g6 bishop, make some problems for it. So we force something h-pawn move like h6 or h5. h5 is usually the main to block completely, but let's see how about the little bit more solid h6. Then usually white plays h5 to gain some space, and in case of bishop h7, then knight c3. Also continue the development, knight c6, and okay, there is no any special target or weakness at this position, so right now still white can continue with bishop e3, knight a5. Yes, knight a5 is interesting because, for example, if he doesn't do any special, maybe he plays bishop e7. This is an interesting question, what will white play? Because the long castle idea would be a bit dangerous. So for example, go with the queen somewhere. Okay, still queen g4 is okay. Maybe he should play king f8, because of course castle is a blunder because of bishop h6, and suddenly he's in a big trouble. So king f8, and okay, long castle, I think it's a bit dangerous because knight b4, and this h7 bishop is really strong here, so the white king can be weak a bit. Knight d3 check, rook c8, not so easy at all. So knight a5, short castle, yes, and knight bc4. How about knight takes b3? If he takes the bishop, we take it back with the pawn. Now the knight is restricted, so there is no knight jump forward. And if he plays kind of bishop e7, then white also has several plans. Maybe queen g4 is still okay. King f8, we do the same plan, and after f4, f5, white had a really strong attack. So now the bishop pair is also not a really important factor, because position is closed, so this dynamic play is much more important. The f4, f5. So white's position is better here, clearly. So knight takes b3 is not a problem at all. Let's see how about knight a c4. Knight a4, queen d7. Yeah, knight a4 is very interesting move, because we would like to exchange that b6 knight, because if the bishop would arrive to a4, that would be excellent. So queen d7. Yeah, because knight takes e3, if he takes our other bishop, we also can't say it's a problem. F takes e3, maybe bishop e7, and we also have several continuation. I think the most natural is, most tempting is knight b6, queen b6, bishop a4 check, and black can't castle. So white's position is also much more promising here. Yeah, what else? The b2 is also protected now with this knight a4. If he would take, then we can take it for check, so it's even worse for black. So queen d7. Knight takes b6 now, and a takes b6. Okay, black's pawn structure became a bit more ugly, however opens the a file, so this is usually not a huge problem. If knight takes b6 instead, would be maybe even a bit more dubious, because rook c1, we come to the c file, bishop e7. And then we already saw this motif several times, queen g4, and white has a really good attack here. Really good pressure on the king side. Black's main problem usually in this type of position is that he doesn't have an f6 knight. Otherwise the queen couldn't go to g4 and this whole plan wouldn't work. So for example, short castle also, bishop takes h6, white is threatening to take the pawn, so probably king f8 is the only move, but this is already so ugly, the h8 rook can't come to the play, white has space advantage also, and he can continue with this f4, f5. Maybe I can say already it's a decisive attack. Okay. So a takes b6, and now bishop takes c4. Well, the c4 knight is already a bit annoying. So after some time we like to take it, and after queen g4, white's position is better again, because now we played queen g4 faster than the f8 bishop developed, so now the bishop can't come out, so even he can't reach this king f8 idea also. And his development is poor. White is threatening with f4, f5 again, so this plan is very good now also. And okay, what can black do? Black doesn't have any special plan. Okay, his a file is opened, but not clear what can he do with that. b5, b4, he can play. Okay, let's see, b5, and we come with f4 also. f4, f5, create some kind of play there. And also very important thing is much easier to play with white. Okay, so this was the knight a c4. Let's see knight b c4. But of course, after knight b c4, black could have been met by bishop a4 check, knight c6, otherwise the king has to move, and bishop c1 exclamation mark. Usually we can say that if we have option, we like to keep the bishop pair, because however the position is closed, later the bishops can be useful and important. Now those are also useful, and if there is a knight on c4, the bishop on c1 is completely blocked that as well, so it's controlling those squares where the knight can go forward. Queen b6 for example, and of course in a long term the c4 knight is not a stable knight. In that case would be a stable knight if the pawn would be on b4 or somewhere else, maybe on c3. But in a long term, if I can play for b3, this knight is not stable, because any time he has to calculate with that. a3. a3 is also a useful move, control the b4 square, maybe sometimes with b4 he can still come, and yeah, let's see what can he do. Bishop e7, of course the d4 pawn is not hanging because the a4 bishop is pinning the knight. So bishop e7. Okay, how about knight takes b2, because this pawn looks hanging, but only looks, because bishop takes b2. queen takes b2. Okay, rook b1 we don't have because the bishop is controlling this, but we have a nice attacking move with knight b5, which is extremely dangerous, as threatening with knight c7. And if he would play kind of, for example, rook c8, then first of all knight takes a7 is also strong, yes, because of this pin. Maybe this is the easiest. And rook e1 is also an interesting option because the queen seems to be trapped. So after rook e2 it's completely trapped. There is no bishop c2 and anything because we can just take it. So white should be winning, and the greedy knight takes b2 was also not good in this time. Okay, so bishop e7, the solid developing move is the normal continuation. Queen g4, yeah, same motif like before, and g5. Black already didn't want to play king f8 because of the previous things. By the way, after king f8 we can play b3 already. The knight has to leave, so on a5 is completely out of play. And now we have several continuations. Probably b4 we can come. Okay, his knight can jump back to c4, but with b4 I gain some space, and simply rook d1 can protect the d4 pawn, and white's position is also more promising. But why we need to play this b3? The immediate rook d1 also seems to be fine. However, now we have to calculate with knight takes b2. Now it's already a bit different like in previously, because after knight b5, for example, he's not impinged in this diagonal, and yeah, he can play anything. Maybe the queen won't be a trap. For example, knight a5 or rook b8 is also an option. Not clear how can he play this. Bishop is protecting the queen very well, and also if kind of queen f4 to prepare with the, I know he can't prepare for rook d2 also properly because this is hanging, but even after queen f4 bishop g5 is also an option, and that bishop is also controlling that important diagonal. Okay, so this is the reason why b3 is a good move, and no problem, the knight is coming back, but I avoided everything, and black position is completely pushed really hard for him. Alright, so let's go back and let's see g5. That's why black tried to play a creative continuation. b3, knight for a5, b4, same idea actually, knight c4, and after rook d1 there is a good initiative again, similar like in the king f8. Now the king is not there, however in the middle is also not better. The h8 rook can't come to the play properly. Long castle is also dangerous on the queen side. If in the middle, that is also a problem. For example, let me show an interesting move. Rook c8 as a normal developing move. For example, this could have been met by the brilliant knight takes d5, and he has problems here. So with this type of tactical moves, black also faces. So yeah, his position is just much harder. Okay, so this was the variation with h6. That's why h5 usually is the main, because after this h6, h5, black is really pushed. White has a great space advantage. Moreover, after h5, doesn't allow the queen g4 plans too. But as usual, everything has advantage and disadvantage also. So h5 disadvantage is that this pawn can be a weakness in a long term, because for example black never can come with short castle because this pawn will be hanging and weak, even if it is not hanging because the queen went somewhere, also weak. And maybe the queen comes back or the bishop. it's lost. On the other hand, bishop after bishop e7, the white h4 pawn can be also a weakness. However, usually this is not a big problem because white has a great play for that on the h file usually. But let's see the variations because those will show everything for us. Knight c3, knight c6, because if bishop e7 instead, to immediately attack the h4, then we simply sacrifice that for a good play. Knight ce2. Of course, on the other hand, it was no chance to protect that pawn. Also, so it was not that, like, for example, we could choose to protect or sacrifice for the initiative because there was no option for that. So that's why our situation is even easier. I'm sorry. Bishop h4, knight f4. This was the plan of knight ce2 to come towards f4. Bishop takes g3. Yeah, because he would like to make some problems. First of all, the h5 pawn is hanging. Yes, so that he can't protect. Queen g5 has a lot of problems, maybe knight takes e6 at least. And discovers threats also. So he should simplify with bishop takes g3, f takes, and bishop e4. Yeah, he tries to activate himself because, for example, if queen e7, also not an easy situation because knight takes g6, knight takes h5. The problem with that, we can be in pin, and also the exchange like rook h5, bishop h5, queen h5. He can come with maybe just exchanged and knight c6, and the bishops are not really good. Anytime we have to calculate with queen b4 check also. The immediate queen b4, by the way, bishop d2 or king move. Okay, maybe let's say king f1, queen takes d4, but we have a check, king d7. If king e7, then bishop g5 check. So king d7 and queen takes g7. So white is just okay here yet. So that's why queen b4 is still early. But after knight c6 is not easy because, for example, if queen h8 check, then queen f8 or even king d7 also a possibility because the knight is protecting the rook. And if queen takes g7, then he has a good counterplay with knight d4. Okay, so this that's why this knight h5 would be too risky. It's more accurate to take the g6 bishop instead. F takes. And okay, however, we have a pawn down, but he has weaknesses, like for example the g6, and somehow we can play more powerful with the bishop pair here. So actually here we have two interesting options. Castle is just a normal developing move, but we have queen d3 also, for example, to threatening to win back the g6. Knight c6, queen takes g6, queen f7. Yeah, he already can't really protect the pawn, because if queen f7, then I can come with rook f1 followed by queen g6. So actually queen d3 wins back the pawn immediately. Okay, we want to take because in the next move long castle otherwise with black, if we wouldn't take the pawn. So if we want to continue the pressure like rook f1, he has even that option also. So queen g6, queen f7, takes. Yes, because why? Possible, I think comeback is also kind of option, but after short castle maybe even he has something here. Bishop e3, interesting, hard to evaluate. It's better to keep the queens or not. I think both of them are option. But if queen takes f7, king f7, then castle can come by tempo. And after king g8, okay, we have a normal position. I think white's chances are a little bit better because of the bishop pair. However, the center is a bit closed, but white can activate the bishop anytime from this diagonal. And I think black's situation is a little bit harder. But okay, castle is the another option. Knight c6, bishop c2. Yeah, now the bishop attacks the pawn, long castle, and bishop g6, because moreover we transferred from this diagonal the bishop, and yeah, I captured that pawn, takes, rook takes, and also nice positional move coming. Of course we are not greedy to hurry to take the pawn. b3. b3 is usually a nice positional move, because now the knight is in some problem. I mean, the b6 knight can't come forward. By the way, queen takes h5 was not working because of knight takes d4, or bishop h5 is also not really good because queen b4, and suddenly black has a quick counterplay here. So b3, h4, okay, now he could save the pawn, but no problem, bishop e3, again a smart move. We simply ignore this h4 move, and if h takes g3, then queen g4, and white chances are also slightly better because the g3 pawn is weak. And the bishops are not bad at all, and white finished also the development. Because compared to, for example, here, if we would play kind of g takes h4, then his queen is coming first, and there is no queen g4 or anything. So bishop e3 is just a nice move. I was still thinking about queen g4 immediately. I think it's also an option, but always queen b4 we have to calculate, because okay, the e6 is still hanging, but he has a good counterplay here, threatening here, on c3 sometimes. If bishop e3, then queen c3, kind of double attack. So it's too dangerous. That's why bishop e3 is the right move order, because if you would play queen b4 now, the difference is that now I don't go queen g4. I play simply g takes h4, and white is clearly better. Alright, so this is also a nice promising position. This was the queen e7. Let's see the bishop e4, which is more practical, more accurate to keep the light square black bishop. Castle. Okay, however, now it's a critical thing is that the h5 pawn is hanging. So the position became a bit sharper, but it's not so clear that take would be good or not. Because, for example, okay, knight h5 would be in pin, so yeah, maybe he plays kind of g6. If knight f6 is not good, because queen takes f6 followed by rook 8 takes h1, and black is winning. And in case of knight g7 check, then the king will go to d7. Now the king is safe in the center because it's closed, so it's no problem, he couldn't castle, and somehow he's a bit more active. Knight is actually trapped on g7, so white can be also in trouble very quickly. So knight takes h5 is not an ideal option. And in case of rook takes h5, he can just play king d7 again, and the e4 bishop is excellent, materially equal. He can come easily with knight c6 and doesn't have any special problem. Rook h8, queen h8, black is okay. I think the position is balanced here. Unclear but balanced. So that's why the developing castle probably the most accurate, because we don't hurry with anything. And knight c6. Let's see how about if black would continue with h4.